basic thing is, why would someone really want to use a private lender? Why is that important? Now, it really comes down to a couple of key things. And one of those key things is you want to be able to do more projects. You want to do larger projects, and you want to be able to do those projects without using your own funds, your own money. And the reason why is because a lot of people have more money than you do. And if you're just going to spend your money, you're probably not going to be able to do uh, more projects and larger projects. So those key things are very important because it gives you a level of flexibility that you wouldn't otherwise have, and it increases your chances of being successful as a real estate person in the business of real estate versus someone who's in the business, but you're just doing it as a hobby. So I think that's very, very important reason to look at private money. It gives you additional ways of doing things that you would not otherwise have. Okay, so how do you do that? We'll go through a slide a little bit later that gets into a little bit different detail, but you want to be able to get a return where you feel that return is something that allows you to say, okay, this is a good return. It's something that I can do, and so that part is important. And the other part that's important is the fact that uh, you get numbers that are really, really great, because that creates this safety net, if you will. And so it's going to vary from one person to the next. It's going to vary from one project to the next. But a lot of people will look at it and say, well, is it in excess of 25%? And that's probably a good number for a lot of people. For others, it's not. And it really depends a lot on the project itself. And I'll take us through, as I indicated, another little chart that I created that I sort of dumped on Andy last thing today, and it'll give you a feel for this piece and some other things as well. So the other part of the how really is associated with the private lender. And you can do those bullets that we just talked about, those three previous things, if the private lender, if he or she, if they really feel safe that what they're doing is going to be just safe. I mean, safe is pretty straightforward word. By that, I mean, they're not going to lose their britches. The numbers are real numbers, and they're really going to work. So that's part of the how, and we'll go into some more detail about that as we go forward. So the next key item that we want to talk about is, what is private lending? I mean, basically, you can look up definitions of it. Bigger pockets, for example. I went and sort of looked up the definition of private lending and bigger pockets, and I was a little surprised because they didn't have a definition for private lending, private funding, or private money, because they refer to it as hard money lending. And hard money lending is not the verbiage that's used sort of in my neck of the woods. A lot of the people really don't use that verbiage, hard money lending. I guess, maybe it means the coins versus the paper part, maybe. Just only joking here a bit, but so that's not used. But the key thing is, it is the same the same meaning, where you have someone who is providing monies, and you basically receive funds from a private individual versus larger institutions other than banks and mortgage companies. So there are alternative types of groups that you can have there. And typically the monies that are available uh, come from, you can get them from small mortgage companies that loan to small business and real estate businesses. And they provide for construction and other type of real estate acquisitions. And typically those things are really probably over $1 million. Those aren't the things that we're talking about here. So what we're talking about are private funds, private funding, where that private funding is basically aimed at projects that's probably $25,000 to $500,000. And, so it's mid-size, small to mid-size projects, if you will. And those small to mid-size projects are the key ones that most of the people that we have as investors and members, those are the projects that they are primarily looking to do. And those are the things that we're going to be discussing here in a little bit more detail and talk about a little bit more. So this is the chart that I was talking about before. And basically, if you look at a private lender and some of the things that they are looking to do, they're looking at safety, and you're looking at return. So if you look at the chart that here is now, part of the problem I got is part of my chart is blocked here. Let me just, if you don't mind, give me a sec so I can see the other part of it that's there. I won't mess up something worse. Okay, I guess it's not going to let me do it. Okay, so so basically, if you had a project where the purchase price was basically, you're going to, let's say you're going to do something like get a project, and that project came as a wholesale deal from an assignment, and the purchase price was just $25,000. But the after repair value is the main thing that changes. So if you look at the after repair value, you got 75 down to $125,000, and I kept the cost of the repair the same. And then you can see the amounts. Let me try to find my chart here. Okay, the net amount that's going to be available for each one of those situations. And clearly, as the after repair value goes up, the amount of net out of it, of course, is going to go up. The bigger that net amount, the more comfortable the person is going to be that's bringing this deal forward and trying to do a project. And also the private lender is also going to be just as happy, because we know that there are costs if something bad happens and the person is forced to, for sake of better words, take the project back. They want to feel that they're safe from that perspective. And it's really all based in the numbers. And we'll get into some other pieces associated with some of the requirements that different private lenders have. But fundamentally, they're looking at the numbers, and they're looking at how safe that particular project is. So with the max loan amount that you see at the bottom of the portion of that chart, where the after repair value is $75,000. And if you take and you put those against the chart at the top, you can see what the maximum loan is at 60 to 70%. And when you do that, you're able to get an idea about what it is that a private lender might, he or she might lend on your particular project. The reason why they're doing that is because if you look at what we do locally here, and the reason why I'm saying locally here is because, especially in New York State, things change from the standpoint of what the exposure is for the private lender. Because the private lender has to look at what are the implications if I have to take this project back, and now it becomes something that I need to take over, and at the same time feel that that I can be whole and complete. Because at the end of the day, one of the most important thing is that that particular person is able to to complete their project, even if you're not able to be there participating with them at the end. And that means that they have to foreclose. If you're foreclosing in New York, it costs about $20,000. That's at the top end. Maybe someone could do it for less, but typically, I think it's safe to say that that's about how much it's going to cost. One of the things that happens is if you are in a non-judicial state, like the state of Texas, it doesn't cost anywhere close to that amount. And typically you can foreclose in about 45 days. I know people who have done it in as short as 40, and you're done. And the legal fees are very small in comparison to New York. So why is that important? That means that the cost of getting the property back is substantially less than it would be here, but the numbers are what they are. And so all that needs to be taken into account by the private lender. And that's the reason why some of the numbers that you saw before is driven the way that they are. Andy, could you go back to that chart so we could just real quickly touch base on that? So if you look at these, at the numbers here, and when we said that it was a safe deal, the numbers drive to a large extent what is a safe deal and what isn't. And so the greater the after repair value versus the purchase price and the repairs, the more money that the private lender is going to be willing to lend on that particular project. And so those maximum numbers that you see there is typical, but they're not necessarily what is going to be required by a particular private lender. It's just going to be rare that you're going to have a private lender that's going to go over 70% of the after repair cost of the property. So, so that's wanted to make sure that people had that view of things, because it really is to a large extent, and I was talking to Cameron in the very beginning, to a large extent, it's really associated with the numbers and how those things work out. But that's not the total answer. So let's get into what do private lenders require. So first position loan, so they're looking for mortgages in the first position because let's just say there were three mortgages on this particular property and they were in third position. Well, most of the things we talked about would not work. So, and Steve Fetus gonna touch base on some of this when he talks. He's gonna have an opportunity to talk a little bit later, and he'll go into some of the details on some of these basic pieces that we're talking about here. So the other one is the reasonable loan amount versus the after repair value, as you see there. And that's what we just basically went through, that bottom portion of the chart really outlined that. And you're going to always need to have insurance. You're going to need to have a clean title, which means that, there's no back taxes, there's nothing there, no liens, nothing that's gonna encumber the property in a way that it's gonna be difficult or impossible for the private lender to take ownership of that property if something happens. And so one of the things that private lenders do, certainly not as much as banks, is they do sometimes do credit checks, credit scores associated with individuals they're loaning money to. Now, I'll just speak for my own personal self. I have never had to do a credit check or go through any kind of credit for any of the private lenders that I personally used. Now, there are private lenders that absolutely require that, okay? And so when you go to look at a private lender, that's something that you need to consider as you decide whether that's the appropriate one for you to work with or not. Down payment, certainly down payment is an important item. And I'll interject again, I have never had to do a down payment. Now, when I get all done, I can't tell you guys who all my private lenders are, but it's one of those things that this is my own personal situation. And the terms and the rates is something that's going to vary from one to the next. What is a good term and rate with one is not necessarily the same with another. And so those are all key things that you need to look at. One of the things that you need to look at also is how is it that private lender is going to perceive you? Because if that private lender does not think that you are worthy of getting their dollars, I think that all those other things could be all pluses, but I think the game is over from the standpoint of that private lender saying they want to do a deal with you. So it's really from that perspective that, you look at private lenders, look at things. There's one additional item to that list that I would want to add, and that would be the property itself and the location of the property. That's very, very important. And so when you take this and you break it down, it's one of those things of you're looking at what is there to make the private lender feel safe from the standpoint of the structure of the property, from the standpoint of its loan position and legal items. Then it's you yourself. And then the third piece is the property itself. So most private lenders are going to want to cover all three of those bases, and they want to feel really good that indeed that's something that's going to allow them to be successful at loaning their money to you. So now, who is it that lends private money? So, I mean, basically, if you look at our group, there are several private lenders that are here in the room. They're on this call. We have and Joe McGuire's face is there, so I'm having a little bit of difficulty because of the fact that I can only see about half of the screen. And I'm trying to, okay, that helps a bit. Let me just move that out of the way.
It's just Scott Spear. He's not here anyway. He bailed on us.
Yeah, he's out in someplace traveling across the US. But Scott Spear is a private lender. So, these folks are individuals who are long-term members of Freedom First. They're people that's on the call that I know are private lenders. And I guess the easiest way for you to find out who they are is to just indicate if you wanted dollars in the chat or something along those lines, or but typically, it's not something that's done through a Zoom meeting. In the past, what we've done is had sessions where individuals are able to talk one-on-one and they get to know each other, and then they end up um, doing a deal together, because that's part of the thing that you get by coming to a REIA like Freedom First. People share thoughts, ideas, and do projects together because they build a relationship, and that networking allows them to do that. One of the big challenges with today's times is being able to have that level of networking. And certainly, if we didn't have the Zoom and things that are internet based and those sorts of things, we'll really be challenged. So to some extent, it's a blessing, but I'll be happy when we can get back together on a one-on-one type session. So the other thing is that we have vendor members that are private lenders. You can see JM Real Estate Capital. They've been to a number of our sessions when we have in-sessions meetings. So one of the things to do is to give them a call. Tell them you saw their information on at this session, and they'll be more than happy to talk to you, let you know how they lay out and do their offering for private lending. So, and then of course, the other folks I talked about before that are, possible private lenders. So when we're talking about private lenders and who lends, one of the most important things that I want to make sure that I touch base upon, two things. One is the people who are private lenders, they actually are really real estate investors just like you are. And what they're doing is they're actually investing in real estate from a little bit different perspective. They're putting their dollars out there so that you can borrow those and they can make money by doing that. And so what's happening is they're actually investing in a passive way. One of the things that we've talked about doing was actually looking at doing a general meeting session aimed at passive investing. And this a private lender is basically someone who's doing passive investing. And so we need to look at that and recognize that that's really still real estate investing, just in a little bit different way. And we're planning on, as I said, having a session where we go through some of the different elements that make up passive investing. So so that's an important point. But most of the private lenders would probably give me a little bit of a tongue lashing if I didn't cover one of the key pieces. And that key piece is, the most important thing is, I'm not in a room, so I can't ask you everybody this question of what is it. Let me just make sure I say what it is. The most important thing is that if you borrow their money and you utilize their money, that you get their money back to them, because it would be really, really be bad if the project was not successful and they ended up holding the bag. So being a person who has borrowed individuals' monies in a private lending type situation utilizing real estate, I'll just tell you that there are not too many things in my life that's more important than getting the money back to them. So it comes a very close second to Mary Jane and my two grandsons down in New York City area. it keeps me awake at night if I'm not going to be able to do that properly. And that's one of the most important things that you would do as a person borrowing the money from a private lender. So, and so just keep that part in mind. It's one of those things that I think is very, very important. So what we're going to do now is um, we're going to go into the discussion portion. And what I want to do is just have Steve Peterson have an opportunity to go back over and talk a little bit about what some of the things that he would be looking for as an attorney. And we can start off, I guess, if we can get back to the previous slides. He probably doesn't need it, but uh, Steve?
Well, from my perspective, the most important reason for using private lending is that it happens quickly. When you're applying for a mortgage with a bank, you can expect the bank to take as much as 60, 75 days to grant a mortgage. And you're paying significant amounts of closing costs because the mortgage is anticipated to be a 30-year mortgage. And that's certainly not what an investor wants. What an investor wants is a loan which will allow them to get the house ready for sale, do the renovations, get it closed. So most of the deals that I close, depending on their size, are anywhere from 6 months to 2 years is the timing for when the money gets paid back. Some of the lenders get monthly payments. Some of the lenders get all of their money at the end when the house is finished and it can be sold. It's just that's just one of the things that you can negotiate with the lender. What I find is that what you need with going to a lender, as opposed to the credit report and the tax returns and the financial statements and all of those sorts of things that the bank will get into, is a track record and a success rate that you can show the lender that you've done it a couple of times before. It's something you do well. Your past projects were successful, and they want to lend you the money as a result of that. The first time you borrow money from a lender, it's very typical that you have to come up with some of your own money to purchase the property, and you have to pay for the renovations. Once a hard money lender or a private lender has worked with you a few times, it's possible that they may finance most, if not all, of the project, including the purchase price and some, if not all, of the renovations. And then that's obviously what you want to get to, so that you're not using your own money for doing the transaction. Most of the hard money lenders in town will also allow my office to close the transaction on their behalf, which keeps it pretty inexpensive because we don't charge much of a bank attorney fee, if any, and it makes it a lot quicker when you're able to get one lawyer out of the middle of the pot. The less lawyers involved in the closing, the better off you are. Any specific questions? So for me, the most important thing is the fact that I can get the deal closed very quickly. The closing documents are half a dozen pieces of paper as opposed to 50 pieces of paper, because hard money lenders, unlike banks, don't sell their mortgages to others. They don't get all of these documents signed that a typical financial institution would get signed at a typical bank closing. And that's a really good thing, because it makes the closing easier to schedule and faster to get done. You also don't have to comply with some of the rules about notices that banks have to give to individuals about when closings can take place and when closing statements need to be given to the individual that's borrowing the money. So there's just significant numbers of reasons to try to avoid going to a bank if this is an investment project.
Yes. clearly all items that I view as making life a lot easier, just being able to, the flexibility. I mean, we mentioned that earlier, but certainly it's one of the big items.
Well, there's no question. If you have a decent sized project and you go to one of our local banks, the bank attorney is going to send me a checklist. The checklist is probably 10 pages long and probably has 75 things that they want to receive before they will schedule a closing. And that actually, when you're doing commercial transactions with a bank like that, you're doubling or tripling your closing fees. The bank attorney fee is going to be a couple $1,000s. Your attorney fee is going to be a couple $1,000s, as opposed to when you're dealing with hard money lending and you're spending around $500 instead of $2,000. So it just makes a lot of sense to avoid a bank if you can when you're investing in a house that you're going to flip. Or even if you're going to keep it, to get it all built and constructed and then apply for a refinance to pay off the lender, and then to have your 30-year mortgage while you're collecting rent.
Yeah.
Steve, there's a question in the chat box. It says, "Hey, Steve," this is from Alex. "Hey, Steve, can you explain deed in lieu versus foreclosure?"
Well, a deed in lieu is, I would say, about a third of the hard money lenders in town ask for a deed in lieu. A deed in lieu is where you give a deed to the house to the lender, so that if you miss a payment, they just take your house. I am not a big believer in a deed in lieu when I represent the borrower at all, because I did have a situation with a REIA member where it was a crazy situation. Our mortgage was due, and the lender agreed that we could have another year, and said, we don't have to put it in writing. Don't worry about it. Nothing needs to be in writing. And we heard through the grapevine that he intended to file our deed in lieu because nothing was in writing, and he really just wanted to steal the house. So I deeded the property to another one of my clients' LLCs, making it so the deed in lieu was ineffective. Now, from the lender standpoint, I don't think a deed in lieu gives them any of the strength that they think it gives them, because New York State courts have specifically said that a deed in lieu is no different than a mortgage. It's voidable, it's just security, and if the borrower were to challenge it, the deed in lieu could be undone. But that does not stop hard money lenders from wanting to have a deed in lieu.
I think that, Steve, just to interject, I think what happens is a lot of people may not be privy to that view that you've just taken, particularly from the standpoint of the person who's borrowing the money. And so, I mean, certainly if they got an attorney that was involved, that would that probably explained to them in the way that you just did. But for others, they don't necessarily understand it that way.
Even when I represent the borrower, if we are going to agree to a deed in lieu, because there are some lenders that absolutely insist on it, I require an escrow agreement signed by the attorney for the lender, where they're agreeing that they're going to give me and my client notice if they're going to file the deed in lieu, so that we can cure any defect, and they can't just run to the county clerk's office, file the deed, and steal our property.
Mm-hmm. So it's,
I have one more question from Alex. Yeah. What is the timeline to get a property back using deed in lieu versus foreclosure?
Well, getting deed in lieu, you can have the property back in 6 minutes, except that it's challengeable. It's comparative to a foreclosure, and I think that the borrower can open it up, and I don't think that the lender has good title if it's challenged. I think it is a title defect. It gives you a little power because you've taken title to the property, but on the other hand, it's very challengeable. Unfortunately, Leon's right with regard to the legal fees are high for a foreclosure. Right now, you can't do a foreclosure or an eviction in New York State. We're probably going on a year where there have been no foreclosures, and now I think it's through May. On the other hand, I think a foreclosure is a much cleaner process. Now, the other thing for you to keep in mind with a deed in lieu is that there's nothing to stop the owner of the property from deeding the property to his wife or into another LLC, which turns the deed in lieu into toilet paper. It is absolutely ineffective at that point because the person no longer owns the property. So it's just not perfect on any level. If you know a deed in lieu is coming, the borrower can go in the back door and change title to the property at any time. Is it a violation of the mortgage to do that? Absolutely. But if you defaulted on the mortgage anyway, you're not making it any worse.
All right, thanks, Steve. There's another question. This one's from Greg Brooks. Other than the note and the mortgage, are there any disclosure type of documents that have to be provided by the lender to the borrower?
On the private lending, no. I mean, we always give a closing statement, and I have that closing statement signed by the borrower, but I don't think that it's actually something that's required. You know, even a mortgage isn't required. You could do a handshake and a note.
Okay.
Alex has a question. Can you add a provision to the mortgage to prevent a title transfer? And is that even legal?
There is a provision in every mortgage that provides you can't do a title transfer. It's a due on sale clause. It's in every mortgage that you've ever seen. But people violate. If you don't make your mortgage payments, you're in default. If you deed out the property, you're in default. So as a practical matter, you can't. There's no way to. It's not criminal, and you can't stop someone from doing it.
How about as it relates to deed in lieu? Can you prevent that when you're writing a mortgage? Okay.
Okay, so folks, keep some of your questions for Steve. We're going to go to Joe McGuire, who is a local hard money, private money lender, and just ask Joe directly, what do you require when you are actually lending funds? Joe, are you there?
Yes, if I can unmute this. Yeah, conversation is probably the best way of doing it. But and I'm going to disagree with one thing. There is a difference between private and hard money. I am not a hard money lender. Private is it's a relation. I think Carl in the chat it's a relationship, and that's what private is. The guy down in Washington, says he teaches private lending. Excuse me, lending, and says people ask who are his private lenders. He says I can't give you my private lenders. Not that I want to keep it a secret, but I have the relation with them. If you don't have the relation, they're not going to be a private lender to you. They may be a hard money lender, but they are not going to be a private claimant. But a private lender, in my opinion, if you have 10 private lenders, you're going to have 15 opinions as to what they require. And my requirements change kind of deal by deal, really. It's a relationship, and what's the deal? But what I look at is, I look at the person, first of all. The person is the first thing I look at. And sometimes that's as far as I look. I was talking to a guy today who was interested in a deal. He was not going to borrow. He was not looking to borrow money from me, but he was looking at a mortgage, and he talked to the borrower and called me and said, I don't want to deal with him, period. I'm not interested. I'm not going to deal with him. I look at the person. What's the reputation or the character? It's as someone said. If somebody and the loans I originated, it's like, if somebody hasn't paid a bill in 5 years, I have no reason to think that I'm the wonderful person they're going to decide to pay. It's not going to. It helps to know the person before they want the money or they want the loan. It's not required. I certainly have done it the other way when somebody calls and says, hey, I have this deal. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, and who are you? It's harder. It takes more work and takes more time. It can be done, but it's an uphill battle, or an uphill, battle's the wrong term. It's an uphill trek versus a friendlier trek, where if you know the person and have as Steve had said, you have a track record, or that they have done these deals, that helps a lot. Second thing I look is the experience, as Steve had said. Can they do this? Have they done it before? They've done a lot of it, so they know what they're doing. Or is this, they took a course last week and they want to go out and buy a house today. They have no idea what they're doing. And there's a lot of people like that. I look at the transaction or the deal. How feasible is it? And I've looked at, I can't tell you, and Scott's not here, he would say the same thing. 80% of the deals I look at, the numbers don't really work. They look great on paper, but when you really dig into it, the numbers aren't there. Everything would have to be perfect. As Joe says, absolutely perfect, and God has to be smiling on you for that deal to work.
Hey Joe, we have one question already, asking,
Yes.
How do I become a private lender and where do I learn? And my immediate answer is right here, people in this meeting. But are there resources you've used in the past outside of personal face-to-face networking to learn how to be a private lender?
Well,
Sure. Yeah.
Scott Spear and Bob Migliorati have on occasion, and I haven't done one recently, put together groups of investors so that it minimizes your risk a little bit. You take a piece of a transaction, or you take a piece of 2 or 3 transactions, and that's just another way that you can get in. I've had a couple of my clients do that, where they buy, for instance, they lend 25% of the money that's been lent, and then they've got at least they're spreading the risk with other lenders. And it gives them much more of a sense of confidence that they're going to get their money back, especially when they're very new at it.
Any case, yeah, if you have the money to whatever you're comfortable with. I did it the way I did it is I used to sell real estate. I bought real estate. I rehabbed and sold and did a lot of foreclosures. So I just had experience with it. But I also had experience with mortgages. I learned mortgages before I learned real estate. I learned mortgage investing back, 70s or early 80s. So I knew the real estate, and so I knew the mortgage, and so from a mortgage investing side. But yeah, if you have a question, call me. I'll tell you everything I know. It's not a secret. So, you know, I look at the deal and does it seem that it would make sense? I can tell you things I don't do particularly, and one of which is I don't do a deal that I don't think I can complete myself. If the borrower is not able to do it, can I do this deal myself? And if I'm over my head with it, I'm not going to do it because there's too much risk and there's too much, you know, the famous story of the guy, you know, the building down in Florida that the mortgage was afraid to foreclose at 10 mortgages on her, 10 in a co-op on a hotel, and they were afraid to foreclose because they didn't know what to do with it if they had it. So that's, you know, and then I look at what does the borrower looking for me to do? What do they want? I mean, I know everybody wants all the money in the world. I understand that. But what's feasible? I mean, what makes sense? And if they're looking for me to take all of the financial risk, in other words, the purchase, the rehab, on occasion, I will do that. But I agree with Steve. I learned long ago that a deed in lieu isn't worth the paper it's written on. So I don't do a deed in lieu. Although I knew an attorney that used to insist on it, and he did it, and he did it for his clients, and he insisted on it. But
No, there's still a couple.
yeah, I just don't think that they're worth anything. So what I do is I do a joint venture. If I'm taking all of the financial risk, I don't see any particular reason why I want to do it for a little bit of interest. So I'm not in, but I will do it as a joint venture. And the way I do them is either we start an entity, or we have one we use one that I have, and we put it in there so I don't have to. Is basically that way I don't have to foreclose. I'm not going to spend. You can't spend $20,000 on a $60,000 deal and expect to make any money. You know, you're going to lose. So so that's the way I do it. But you know, we split whatever agreement is in the joint venture. That's how we split the profit. I have never, for what it's worth, and I know a guy that lent. He used to do a lot of lending here, and I borrowed money from him. He used to, guy I know, he would lend him the purchase and the rehab. He would lend him all the money. And I guess that was good for a while, but then I saw these properties these addresses coming up in foreclosure, and I knew who had them. I went, I mean, you know, I can look at title too. And I went and drove by them, and he had not touched them. I mean, literally, you could tell from the curb, they had not been touched. Paint was peeling off, windows were out. He had not done a thing, but he took the money. And so I was talking to him later, the guy that lent the money, and said, yeah, he used to be a great borrower, and then he turned. But when he went bad, he just went bad. And I got news for you. You lose money on a deal, it eats up all of the profit on a whole lot of deals. So, and he lost a lot of money on those deals. And those deals he lost on, he probably gave up everything he made with them. And you know, that's fine if he wants to do that. I just don't want to do that. I've been around too long for it, is all. When I do the joint venture, the person runs the project. I'm not looking for a project. You know, he runs the project, And I've never had to take one back. I've come close. And in all honesty, I've come very, very close. I came within a day of doing it. And I had been telling the person and telling them and telling them and giving them warning, message, whatever, talking to them. And the day I went over to actually do it, they had contractors there and they were working on it. And I said, great, I don't have to do it. But I had prepared people to hear about it because, as Scarlett said, it's a small town. And I knew that that would get around, and I wanted people to know that this is probably what was going to happen. But fortunately, I've never had to do it. Only came close once. Other than that, it's worked well. The other thing I look for, the fifth thing, is I look for my exit. My exit is always in mind. I don't want to own it. I'm there, and what's my exit? How do I get out of here? And what's my plan B exit? Everybody is going to, I understand that people are going to sell the property. They're going to rehab it and sell it, or they're going to rehab it and rent it, and they're going to get a loan, a bank loan, and take me out. That's fine, depending on the person and all of that. But if it's going to be a long-term deal, that's fine. I have not had to foreclose on a loan I've made. Some of them have come due. A lot of them have come due. And I've told the people, as long as you're paying, that's fine by me. I'm not going to call it. That's fine. I'm flexible on that. But that's kind of it. But I'm not there for 10 years either, but they don't want me for 10 years. But if something happened that property didn't sell, I'm not going to foreclose it. As long as they're paying, that's fine.
Joe and probably Steve both. Fritz asked a question. I use a simple promissory note that my lawyer drafted. It states amount loaned, interest rate, and payback due date. It works well for me, probably because of the relationships involved, but are there disadvantages that you see in that approach?
My perspective, it's not secured.
Well, it's definitely not secured.
And I'm a secured lender.
I even did a closing earlier this week between a mother and a daughter, and we recorded a mortgage.
Can you explain?
Everybody wanted to be protected.
For the new people, can you explain what you mean by secured?
Secured means that a mortgage is filed at the county clerk's office, putting the world on notice that if they buy the house, there is a lien against it. If you just have a promissory note, no one in the world knows about it except for the lender and the borrower. A promissory note's like it's like your Visa card. It's just a personal obligation.
Yeah, a mortgage pledges the property as collateral in case the loan's not paid. The lender takes the property.
I have a question from Greg Brooks. With the joint venture that Joe participates with, who owns the entity and who owns the entity that owns the property?
You want to make a wild guess? Yeah, I do. Because I'm not going to foreclose. That's the whole point, is I don't have to spend $20,000 on foreclosure costs. But we have a written joint venture on what the proceeds are, what the profit is. It's not a steal the property deal. It's that in my opinion, a deed in lieu isn't worth anything. And $20,000 is an awful lot to pay for a foreclosure.
Elliot is asking, can you talk about the options between structuring loans with interest only payable monthly versus principal and interest due upon sale of property, or end of the loan period, whichever comes first?
I'm not sure who that's addressed to, but I've done them both. If it's the first time that we're doing business, I generally will want monthly payments, just so I know they're alive and they're and they don't forget me. The more deals we do, then it's private. The better the relationship, the more flexible it can be. It's not. I don't have. I'm not a bank. I don't have a book of manual here that says this, and this. It's a negotiation and it's a relationship. And I tried to make it work as best I can to make it work for the borrower and my safety. What I'm always, from my perspective, what I'm looking for is my money back. I've talked to, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, and I used to originate. I used to put a lot of loans on for banks, and it's like, these guys are idiots. I would not lend this guy a dime. He has never paid, and he's not going to pay. And as I told the realtor, I said, well, we're real people. We really want our money back. This is not bank money. This isn't fees. We're not selling the loan off to the secondary market and being recapitalized and making fees. This is our money. This is real money. So I look for safety. And what I'd said is, actually, the older I get, is I give up yield for safety.
A question from Stacy: if you foreclose, can't you recoup the cost from the borrower?
If the property's worth it.
And if the borrower has it, typically you don't recoup that cost.
And Diane Yale asking, what is the average length of the loan?
I'd say a year.
Yeah. I used to do shorter. I used to do 6 months with an automatic rollover, just to say that we're not married here. If you're very difficult, or if you think I'm very difficult, neither of us has to stay here. People get nervous on that and whatever, and the market tended to be more a year, so I generally go a year. But I did the 6 months, and I said, we'll just roll it over. There's no law that says you can't roll it over. But yeah, people like a year, so I tend to do a year now. And I understand, they can't get it fixed in 6 months and sold and all of that. So that's fine. Again, I'm not, if you're dealing with an institution, they have solid rules. If you're dealing with an individual, it's what makes sense. You're trying to make the deal work, and I don't know how I can say that it's personal lending is personal. It's not an institution. It's not a manual book or a rule book. And I don't know, Steve can tell me that I'm wrong. There are some streets I won't drive, I won't lend on in particular areas because I can't handle the property. If I had to take it back, I can't handle it. Good properties, absolutely, but it's
For me, it's all about the person.
yeah, it's all about the person. There are other people that love them.
I've had people lend money to Joe LaBarbera just based on my word that he's got a track record and he's going to pay him back.
Yep, absolutely.
I appreciated that.
You're welcome.
I've lent money to people based on the recommendation. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't hear Leon, but I think we've run out of questions for this particular section. So I think we're going to Joe LaBarbera. Oh, there he is.
The
Yeah.
Joe LaBarbera Show.
Yeah.
About that.
Just a couple of things before we go to the Joe LaBarbera show. There was a fair amount of discussion that Joe went through around JV, joint ventures. And I know there are probably a few people on the call that's not that familiar with them. With JVs, I would just say it really is sort of taking private lending and other ways of doing things within real estate investing and putting it on steroids. I mean, it gives you a lot of opportunity and leeway to do things and work together that you would not otherwise have. And the other piece that was quite clear as Joe went through things was the relationship goes beyond the deal and the numbers. It really is sort of weird to use the word personal and private all together, you know, so, but it really is a situation where, you know, private lending becomes more of a personal type things where people need to feel comfortable with each other. And there's this old saying, and Joe pointed it out in the end of what he was saying there, Joe McGuire did. And I mentioned it when I said to make sure that the person gets their money back if it's a private lender. And that common saying is protect the principal. So what we're going to do now is move to the Joe LaBarbera show. And what I want to do is just ask Joe to share with us some of the things that he's done as a private lender borrower who actually borrows funds. And so, Joe, could you give us two projects? Let's just start off with two projects, and one of them under $100,000 and one of them over $200,000 to give people a little bit of an idea about what to expect and what has been your experience as you have borrowed money from private lenders.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to do the two examples. Because I keep getting phone calls from not only people who want to do private lending for flipping, but also for people who want to buy and hold. So I actually got another phone call today. So I'm going to go over two examples. One designed for flippers. The other one is designed for people who want to buy and hold rentals. Okay. Because now when I started out, I had no money. Most of us who go to hard money lenders, we have no money at all. And what I figured out was, and obviously, you know, especially Joe was going over, you had to make sure you find a really great deal. And I didn't understand it at first, but as I go through this, you'll start to understand, because one of the things that I did was for the first deal I'm going to go over, which is going to be for the flippers, is a house I did in Canandaigua. I was able to get the money and I didn't even ask for it. And I'll tell you how that happened. And it was because of my relationship with them. Now, I didn't have the money to buy this property. And my initial goal was to assign the property. And I remember I needed a proof of funds letter. I didn't have a proof. It was a house in Canandaigua. I'll give you the real numbers. It was worth around $135,000. And I had the opportunity to buy it at $60,000. And I said, I got to get this house. And all I wanted to do was assign it. And the guy goes, you need a proof of funds letter. I'm like, okay, I'm going to call my hard money lender, because, you know, I would always recommend people to him. I've done a couple of deals with him, but not a whole lot. And I called him up and I go, listen, you know, I got this deal. I need a proof of funds letter. Can you help me out? And I'm driving. I'll never forget. I'm driving in my vehicle, you know, and I got my earpiece on in my car, and he goes, well, tell me about the deal. I go, it's a house in Canandaigua. It's $60,000. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath ranch. What's it worth? $135. How much are you going to put into it? Needs about maybe $12,000. And what had happened was there was somebody else who was trying to buy it prior to me. And through this group, this REIA group, I was contacted saying, hey, you interested in this property? Okay. And again, all from the networking. So when I told him the numbers, he goes, he literally said, I'll never forget. He goes, I got you. I go, what? He goes, yeah, I got you. You've always done right by me. This is a fantastic deal. It's a no-brainer. You put up the 12. He asked me, he goes, can you put up the 12 to fix it? I go, yes, because I was doing wholesaling, had a little bit of money, and but not much, and my credit sucked. So I know at that time I wouldn't have been able to get it anywhere, but it all fell back on the deal. So he put up the $60,000. I put up the $12,000 on the property. We were into it for about total between buying it, fixing it up, and closing costs and the holding costs, everything else. I ended up making, it was the biggest check I'd ever made at the time. It was $33,000 in change for that check, okay, for that property. It was about, I remember we closed it within 30 days which was very, very important because of the people we were buying it from. They wanted to close it fast. The first deal died, and I always tell them two things: speed and cash is what I bring to the table. And the hard money lenders, all day long, which Steve obviously covered in the beginning. And then what happened was that I think we spent about two months rehabbing this place. And then we sold it within the first 30 days, and it took 45 to 60 days for a closing. So we had it about 6 months. And my lender made somewhere, I think in interest, we by the way, he was charging us 12% interest with 2 points. And each percentage point is 1% of the loan. So he charged us $1,200. So technically we borrowed 60. He gave us $58,800, whatever the heck it was. We had to pay back the 60. And by the way, if I talk fast, I apologize, and please don't let the numbers confuse you. Bottom line, I borrowed 60. My lender made 6 months worth of interest. He made a little over 6 months. He made around, I think by the time we were done, he made like $3,600. And I made $33,000. I didn't care if they were charging me 16% interest or 20% interest, because I made more. There was enough meat on that deal to choke a dinosaur and the dinosaur's family. Okay. And that's why my lender at the time, who I'd asked just for a proof of funds letter, because I was just going to sign it out. I wanted to make a quick $7,000 or $8,000 to get out. And he goes, I was buying it for less than 50 cents on the dollar. That deal worked very, very well. He was very happy. We were paying him every month. We were paying him, our payments was $600 a month, interest only. Because obviously when you're paying a lender, you're paying interest. We still had to pay back the $60,000, but who cares? I made $33,000. I was not going to complain. I was more than happy to give him more than that. I almost felt bad. I talked to him. I'll never forget. He goes, Joe, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I go, what are you talking about? I go, you made like $3,600. I made $33,000. What are you talking about? And he goes, Joe, he goes, I made my money. I made my 12% plus my points, and you made your money. And also what I didn't realize at the time, he also had over 100 loans that he was getting paid on every single month to other investors that he was loaning money out to. So yeah, do the math on that one. Okay. And mine was a rinky-dink loan. Okay. So it allowed, and by the way, I have done every single property that I've gotten, and I own a bunch of properties. Every single one of them I have gotten through hard money lending. Okay. And then the next deal I'm going to talk about, and Steve touched upon it, is because I would not have been able to have gotten it it would have taken me too long. And these are the ones that I buy and hold. Okay. If we actually get a chance, I'll talk about another deal, but I don't know if we're gonna have enough time to go into that one, which I just did the refi today with Canandaigua National Bank, which I originally purchased through a hard money lender. But I'm gonna, and by the way, are there any questions in regards to the flips, to the flip side of this? We're good?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I just had a question about capital gains. Like when you're doing the flip with the private money, is it the same? Are the rules the same? Like, is it sometimes you keep it longer so that you don't have to pay the capital gains?
Look, I mean, if I wanted to keep it, I still would have made money, but I didn't want to. Even with the capital gains, I still did very, very well. A lot of times, especially on the bigger deals, if you're paying $1,000, $2,000 a month in interest-only payments, it'll eat away at your profits. In that case, if I kept it over a year, it would have cost me $7,200 in interest, plus the taxes would have been another $4,500. There's $11,000 in change. Then you got to figure you're going to be paying your insurance. That was probably another $800 or $900. So it would have automatically, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. I would have paid that in capital gains, or I would have held it. And the other problem is if I had held it, something could have happened. Maybe a bolt of lightning would have come down and struck the house. Who the heck knows? My goal was to get in and get out. Okay. So it wasn't about me just trying to save on. Sometimes you can do that, and that depends on the deal. Okay. And this one right here, I still did very, very well. Okay. At all. That was like I've made other checks, but that was like my biggest one. I was like, oh my God, 33,000 and change. I loved it. And by the way, any other questions on this before I move on to the rental side of borrowing?
Joe, on all the deals that you've done, how often have you given anyone a credit report or a financial statement?
None.
That's what I thought. That's what I wanted you to say.
Yeah, and understand, everybody, when I got back into real estate, I was broke. I started with nothing. I was mowing lawns and making work construction, making $12 an hour because I lost everything. So they didn't care. My credit score sucked, and it was bad. But they didn't care about that. One thing they cared about was, number one, can I pay them back? And I tell them, I pay them before I eat, and they all know that. And no matter what, it's the deal. That's all I did was, as long as I brought them a great deal, not an okay deal, it was a great deal. And by the way, the lender never even drove to the house. He did all this over the phone. Right there. Okay.
So did the hard money lender make a similar amount to you?
He made $3,600 and change, plus another $1,200 from the points. He made around $4,800, give or take.
Okay.
He made 12% plus 2 points, 14% yield, whatever it is you want to call it. But actually made more than that because he got paid back in like 6 months. So he took that same amount of money and loaned it out again to somebody else. Okay. And by the way, don't let all these numbers confuse you. And I apologize if I talk fast. I want to be respectful, and I want to make sure to keep this down because I know we're getting down to the wire here in time. Okay. Now, what I always get to, I had again today, I had a guy who wanted to buy a property. He goes, Joe, maybe I can get a hard money loan on this rental property. And then we went over the numbers, and he would have been automatically in the red. He would have had to have taken $300+ out of his pocket every single month. And I have purchased many, many, many rentals from hard money lenders. Okay. And I'm going to go over a deal that I purchased. It was brought to me again, no joke, by being in this group. The gentleman had a 4-unit property in the Park Ave area. Yeah, Park Ave area. He couldn't buy it himself. And the gentleman who owned it lived in California. moved to California. He's a former coach of the Amherst. Not only was he very busy in California, he was also going to and from Canada coaching up there. And the guy here couldn't buy it. And he brought it to me. And basically, I went and looked at the property. It needed some work. It was doable. And I got on the phone with the guy and I asked him, and I go, what are you looking to get for the property? And he goes, Joe, I want to walk away with $50,000. Okay. And by the way, I didn't have $50,000. Then I asked him, what's owed on the mortgage? And by the way, this is a 4-unit, right off 2 houses. We're on Vic Park B on Park Avenue, or off of Park. And he goes, I owe 151. So I go, let me get this straight. You want 200, basically you want 201. I go, sold. I go, I don't care if I got to beg, borrow, ski mask, or a gun, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to get the money. So what I did was I called up my lender, and I had done deals with them before. And I call them up. I go, hey, I've got this problem. By the way, it's a 4-family, fully occupied, all 1-bedroom units, under market rent, and with a 4-car garage, off-street parking. And it's a 5,000 square foot building. The guy had owned it for I don't know how many years. So I called up my lender. I said, hey, I got a 4-unit. And he goes, Joe, what do you want it for? And by the way, I paid the guy who brought it to me. I gave him a referral fee. So I figured out the numbers. And by this place was making around a little over $3,000, maybe just over $3,000 a month. That's it for a 4-unit off of Park Avenue. And the place was being band-aided together. So when I called up my lender and I told him where it was, he goes, oh, really? And he goes, how much you need, Joe? I go, just to cover everything, I want $220,000. He goes, done. Goes, write it up, get it over to Steve Peterson, and then get whatever you get over to him. Okay. So wrote everything up, got everything situated, borrowed the money, and my mortgage payment was actually I wrote it down here. My mortgage payment on this property was $1,650 a month, interest only. Okay. I didn't care if I was paying $2,000 a month, because when I tell you what it appraised for, you're going to understand. Okay. So my goal, because a lot of people, whenever you borrow on a lot of these rentals and you're paying the higher interest rate, the numbers don't work. On this one right here, I raised the rents. It took me about, I don't know, 5 or 6 months for dealing with everybody, getting a situation, people moving out. But I raised the rents from $3,000 a month, just over $3,000, $3,050 to $4,020 a month. That's number one. So I raised the value of that property. My mortgage payment was $1,650 a month. My taxes were about $1,000 a month, because it's Park Avenue. Welcome to New York State. So there's about $2,650. Insurance, I think it was like another, I think it was maybe $100, $150 a month. So I was paying somewhere right around $2,800, $2,900 a month, whatever the heck I was doing. Okay. Even though I still had to put work into it, technically on paper it was showing I was making roughly $1,000 a month. Okay. That wasn't the part that excited me. Okay. Now, the great thing about it was that I had to go and get it refinanced out. And one of the things that you got to be careful of is that if you buy a rental, let's just say you spend $100,000 or let's say you buy a $100,000 rental and you pay 80 grand. Between that and closing costs, you're at $85,000. Then you have to go pay back that hard money lender. You have to go to the bank. The bank may only give you 75% of the value of that property. You're into it for 85, the bank is only going to give you 75. And after closing costs and everything else, you may only end up with between $68,000 and $70,000. You got 70 in your hand, but you owe 85. Where's that other $15,000 going to come from? From your pocket. If you don't have it, you're in trouble. Now, in this one right here, I needed to pay back $220,000, but I knew this property was worth way more than that. Okay? Way more than that. So when I got it, when I went to the bank, it was already an asset to me. It was already an asset. I didn't have to apply for it. I have to say, was Joe going to qualify for this? No. So what happened was, okay, Joe, what's your mortgage on it? $220,000. It appraised for $450,000. Okay. So now you're starting to understand why I didn't care if I was paying 15, 60. It didn't matter to me. Okay. I bought it for 220. It appraised for 450. Now, if I wanted to, I could have pulled out about 75% of the value of that property. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go into major debt. But if I had pulled out the 75%, I would have qualified for $337,500, which means I would have gotten about $117,000 after closing. I probably would end up with about maybe $115,000. And that was all with 100% financing. I didn't take 1 cent out of my pocket. I still have that property, by the way. And by the way, prior to me refinancing it out, I had a gentleman offer me, he wanted me to come to his office. He was a local broker. He goes, I will write you a check tomorrow morning for $100,000 if you walk away from the property and sign it over to me. And I said, no. I said no to 100 grand. I couldn't believe I actually did that. I still think about that. And I'm glad I didn't, because I would have left another 100,000 and change on the table. Okay. So that worked, because now, I mean, you know, so obviously my mortgage payment went from that high interest down to about, I think I'm somewhere around 4 and change, something like that. I can't remember, maybe 5%. I don't remember right now what the heck it is. But the point of that story is that it worked all the way through. Even if I broke even, I know down the road, I still would have been making money, because I still had all that equity, and I didn't have to worry about keep paying that high interest rate, because there was plenty of room for me to do rent growth and value growth. Okay. So does everybody understand that? And I apologize if I threw out a lot of numbers very quickly, but does anybody have any questions on what I just talked about? Everybody understands?
I think everybody is in shock, Joe.
I don't know about shock. I'm just, look, and understand that, you know, I started out just like everybody else. I just didn't have the money. Okay. And understand, because of hard money lending, I'm very grateful and very thankful for where I am now, but everything that I have is through hard money lending. And by the way, that story that I just told you is nothing to the one that I just did today. That originally started from hard money lending, which I won't even get into, because I don't know if we even have the time for that, because I want to make sure that we allow people, you know, if they have questions and things like that. But just understand, once I understood the power of working with a hard money lender, I was able to build my net worth, be able to build my wealth. And now when I find properties, I'm not afraid. If I used to be scared of, oh my God, $500,000, it doesn't scare me anymore. It used to. And then I realized, wow, there's lenders out there who look for me the way I look for properties. It doesn't scare you. In the beginning, oh man, I was shaking in my boots. I was sitting at Steve Feedon's office going, is this for real? Is this really happening? Oh my God. And, you know, but you just get more and more comfortable as you progress with it.
So after hearing that, maybe we should do a general meeting session just on super sweet deals.
It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah. So,
but I just wanted to be realistic and just let people see the numbers. Okay, that's all.
no, super, absolutely. So now, one of the things that that we wanted to do was just thought about Joe McGuire. Do you have an example that you could give us around maybe one of the lending deals that you've done? We had Joe do two things there, so just maybe one of the lending deals that you've done and it's been sort of different, for sake of better words. If you don't, we can go to the question and answer session. I'll leave it up to you.
Well, we can go to question and answer. I do have probably the most interesting deal I did was one I lost everything on actually. It was interesting in that it was a mortgage that I purchased. Yeah, I also purchase mortgages. So and I'm flexible, I'll go out of the area to buy a mortgage. But this was a mortgage I purchased in the area, and it was a very nice. It needed work. It was an old farmhouse, a lot of land out in Ontario County, and I purchased the mortgage from the seller. Somebody brought it to me, and the seller was ill, and their motivation was their medical bills, and the county help on their medical bills. So they were limited as to how much income they could have. So we structured a deal to pay them money, but keep it within the guidelines what the county would allow. And long story short, it was what went well. Actually, the part that saved me was I structured the deal that I bought her mortgage with a mortgage. I gave her a note back for it with structured payments. And because of that, I used a couple of different attorneys. So there were three attorneys in this transaction, as we had talked about a couple of days ago. There was my attorney who wrote up the paperwork, and I went to them because they did a couple other creative deals for me, and they were in the area. They knew, the seller knew them. And an attorney, a local attorney who I would consult with, he really wasn't in it, but I would talk to him about ideas on it. And her attorney, long story short, bought it, all of this, it was structured payments. The person that brought it to me, they were paid something, referral fee, but they wanted part of the bigger profit. So their fee was going to be a little bit upfront and a share of the profit. It was I share profit, so it was a share of the profit, and we received a letter that the county, it was in default for taxes. Not a lot, but it was in default for taxes. The county was going to foreclose, and it was, well, we could pay the taxes and foreclose it, and I could foreclose it. It's expensive, but still, there was equity in the deal. It was not a question on that. There was equity in it. But the attorneys, who I agreed with, three separate groups of attorneys said, we'll let the county foreclose, let them pay for the foreclosure, and we'll take surplus proceeds, because there is certainly more than enough of surplus proceeds to pay the mortgage. And from my proceeds, I would pay the seller of the mortgage and the balance to the referral fee. Well, none of the attorneys were aware. We received a call. One of the attorneys received a call from the buyer of the property. They wanted all the title work. They wanted the title, the abstract, the survey, all the work. None of the attorneys were aware that the county took title before they auctioned it. They took title the day before or something on judicial action. And so they owned it at the auction, at the property auction. So there were no surplus proceeds. So, I lost money. Fortunately, I didn't lose a lot, because my note to her, my note to the seller was conditioned on and contingent on the underlying mortgage, which had been wiped out. And her attorney was aware of it. I mean, he was involved in that conversation. And the referral person, they didn't get any more because it was wiped out. And I lost a little bit, which I didn't like. I always remembered that. And I just hate driving by that house because it was a big house, an old farmhouse, and a pond. They put a pond in, and it was a nice place. But we lost. But from that, I learned I always, when it comes to taxes, I always call a municipality. I don't care what the title company says. I don't care what the report says. I had a deal that said that the taxes were current on a different deal. I called that county. Very difficult to work with. But they said, the person made a comment, taxes, there are no taxes owed. I says, does that mean they're paid? And it turned out they were not owed because there was a tax lien sold. So they were delinquent taxes and there was a tax lien, but when you looked at the county and spoke to them, there were no taxes owed. So I point to the story was I learned to always go back to the taxing municipality and talk to them and find out what actually is going on. But I did lose money on that deal. Very creative deal. I was very impressed with the buying the mortgage with a note back and contingent and all of that. Got to pay attention to the taxes. That's all really.
Okay. Think a lot of, certainly a lot of interesting information. I think what we'll do now is go to question and answer sessions unless someone else had some other thought or idea around some specific piece that they wanted us to cover that we didn't. So why don't we just go and just any questions, answers, we'll try to answer and so just open it up. I know people have asked questions as we went through things, but this gives you another opportunity if you had a thought, idea. Do we have anything in chat associated with questions? Okay.
We've been fielding a good number of them right as we've been going through the presentations themselves. So
Right.
I think we're pretty current. Everybody's welcome to unmute. You don't have to turn your camera on if you're not comfortable doing it. You can just unmute and ask, or you can type the question out and I will read it.
Joe, can you hear me okay, Joe?
Yep, we hear you fine.
Joe, you are amazing.
They know Joe McGuire is. That's why.
No. Joe, you're Joe.
Mhm.
Anyways, so money laundering, that is for short-term projects, right? It's really not meant for long-term financing. It's really for transitional financing. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Which Joe's, Carl?
Joe over there. That Joe.
Mr. La Barbera.
Barbera, right?
I thought of Joe McGuire. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Wait, so your question was about doing the short-term financing for as far as for the rentals?
No. So the short-term financing is really for transitional financing, getting from point A to point B. Long-term financing is really not this, right? It's
Exactly.
a transitional thing. Go ahead, elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, because I mean, I knew that on like that 4-unit over there, I mean, it could support it, but that wasn't my long-term goal. My lender didn't want to just loan it out for the next, whatever amount of years. He wanted to make his money but it gave me the opportunity to bring it in and then go to the bank and present it as an asset, because my goal was to, to basically to hold it. I could sell it, but the capital gains tax will just kill me. And I just didn't want to even deal with that, but I wanted it for the long-term buy and hold. And my ultimate goal was to cash flow it. And it was doing okay, not great at the time, but there was, was enough equity left in there. And, but I knew that going in. It's because I also knew the area. I mean, that was a no-brainer. It's Park Avenue. So that's how I was able to move so quickly. But even my lender knew, he goes, Joe, if you need it longer, my lender would, I'll give it to you for longer than a year. It's not a problem. He doesn't mind making the interest, but he helped me out get the property. And then when I went to the bank, it was cake trying to get getting financing for it, because obviously, they obviously looked at my credit, but more importantly, they saw what I purchased it for and what I was asking for it. I mean, as far as because I could have pulled out a ton of money out of it. I just didn't want to do that, because my main goal was to basically pay it down eventually, or be in a position where I just don't have a mortgage on it, or I can sell it or do whatever I want to do with it instead of just being in debt. But no matter what, I always have to figure out, like I did with that guy today, what's he going to be paying per month? Because initially it may sound great, but like Joe refuses 80% of deals that he looks at. When it comes to buying a rental property through a hard money lender, I refuse an unbelievable amount of deals, because the numbers just don't work, and it's just not worth it unless the price is really good and the area. That place had location, and price. So it hit all the boxes.
So Carl is a part of it, really, the fact that you're using the hard money, and it doesn't really matter, I don't think, if you're doing a flip or whether you're doing something that allows you to transition, for sake of better words, into a longer term financing. The key is that you now have at your disposal the ability to get funds to cover that gap, and so that you are now able to structure and put together a deal that would otherwise be impossible unless you was sitting there with a fistful of money, so to speak. Carl, did you disappear on me?
No, that's it. It's exactly the whole question to Joe, and that is correct. These are transactions to be transitional from point A to point B, right, Joe?
Right.
And but let me ask you this: you really don't use hard money lending for long-term financing. That's really not the case, right?
No. I mean, I did it on one deal, which I still have now. I did it for about it was about a year and a half or two on one, but my lender was okay with it. He didn't mind it. Actually, that's one of the ones that I did the refi on today, and that I actually closed with Canandaigua National Bank, and that was 9 properties. But that deal was it was well worth it. It still made money, and that was a serious value play. So I increased the value of those properties by 4 times, just shy of 4 times what I purchased it for. And by the way, that was no money out of my own pocket.
I mean, I've had individuals who say to me, okay, I'll provide you a long-term loan, and, 10, 15 years. Okay. But, it's like, and it's coming from a person, a private lender, but they're still making what is a long-term loan, but the loan is normally at 8.5% or greater. And right now, that's not competitive to a lot of the rates that you're going to get from other institutions. So, basically you take the approach of going from point A where you're where you're able to use the hard money or private funding. And then from there, you get to a situation where then you can do what Joe's doing. And until something happens, that would be very strange. I really don't see it ever happening where the rate that a private lender is giving you is less than what you could get from an institution long term. Clearly, there are situations, we won't get into all the details of it, where you can get money from a private lender that's less than 8%, but that's like a special type situation. But I do know people who have done it before. So yeah, it's right now, even though it's long, it could be a longer term thing. It doesn't really work out if you start looking at the actual numbers associated with the deal. And it's not that it doesn't work. It's just that the other numbers are better.
So there's a question in the chat from Dom asking, as a new investor, will hard money lenders mentor or coach us along the process? Well, you're in the right place for that answer, for sure, because that's kind of what FREIA is about. But I will take part of that. And as you're getting into the business, you need 3 key components. You need a lawyer, somebody who understands your money, like an accountant, and you need somebody who understands real estate, like a mentor or coach. So you're in the right place for all of those, and I will let the panel take the rest of the answer.
That is an awesome question. Go ahead, Joe.
That's a McGuire question.
No, I think Carl's talking to you, Joe.
No, I'm not a lender. That's you.
No, but you're a mentor.
I'm a borrower. I have a sign that says, give me money.
Funny.
Yeah, if anybody wants to call me, I had already told them, yeah, I'm happy to talk to people. I'll talk to them, I'll work with them. If they have something and they want to join, do it together or whatever, that's fine. Or just tell them what I know, that's free. We tell people what we know.
I meet with new members all the time, and there's no fee for getting together.
Yeah, and same thing with me. I mean, people can call me. People call me all the time. If I can answer a question, great. If I can't, there's somebody in this group that does, that knows the answer.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that all of us have, to a certain extent, and help people. I mean, I do some of the same thing. I pick out individuals who have never rehabbed the house before, don't know how to use private money, and I take them through all the steps to make sure that they now, once they're done, they know how to do it themselves. I don't have to go back and show them anything. It gives them a great starting point. That's part of being a member of the organization. That's part of the networking and things we talk about. I don't broadcast it because I don't have the bandwidth to cover all the people that would want to do it. And at one point in time, we actually went down the road, Joe McGuire, myself, maybe a couple other people. We actually was doing classes and those sorts of things. And then we just said, it's not really worth the amount of money that we're getting. So we just went back to just individuals who really wanted to learn. We basically give them all the information. When I say that, let's take a rehab. Here's my contractor. Here's the way I do it. Here's here's where you go to for the private money. And we just go through the whole step. And it's really hard to do that with a whole group of people. So my approach is every year I'm going to pick 2 or 3 people just out of the hat. And that's what I'm going to do. So, I mean, that's one approach. Certainly we're open to doing other things, but you know, in this group, you saw the slide when it came up earlier. This is a not-for-profit group. We basically give our time and give our effort to help others. Basically, it's there for you as a member. You just have to ask for it. And you know, back to the first part of, you know, you have key people like Steve Peterson, Chris Sardone. Those are all members of Freedom First. And what they do is they allow you to interact with a professional who is a CPA, a professional that is an attorney that understands what is necessary for our real estate investors to be successful. And so it's one of those things that you get as by being a part of the organization, and you get the networking that Joe Lababeris mentioned a couple of times this evening, and all those things help people to be successful, because you know, you can go to a group of folks and say, and it could be your family, it could be, my family's down in Texas, so I don't worry that much about them, but and they don't get that much concerned about what it is that I'm doing in the way of real estate. Not at this point in time, of course, but in the very beginning, it could have been different. But in a lot of cases, you have people who say, well, you can't do that. That doesn't make any sense. That won't work. But if you network with this group, you can hear each person sort of go through, okay, here's what I did. Here's why I was successful. Carl was giving all the accolades to Joe LaBarbera. Carl has done some of the same similar sorts of things himself. It's just that the space that he's in is not wholesaling. It's more in the space associated with landlording and providing support for people and how you do things in the landlording space. So it's a part of this group and what it is that that we try to provide as individuals, helping people, but also helping the community.
That's awesome, Leon. But I had a question for Joe LaBera, if we're still doing that.
Yes.
Would you be, I'm trying to get into wholesaling, and but would you be open to letting me see your contracts and what you use to make sure that it would be good for you?
Absolutely. You can get a hold of me anytime you want.
Awesome. That'd be great. Thanks.
It's the same contract he used to sell a property to me back in 2000 and what was that, Joe? 2004 or somewhere like that?
Oh, wait, that's when it was House of Webster, I think.
No, not that one. That was the one in the 10th ward, and I just sold that house. So, you know, it's so long ago you won't remember it. You know, I do because
hundreds of houses ago. I don't even remember.
Yeah, and the point here is, if you would have said, if you would have went back to that time period and even maybe right now for you, Cameron, today, someone would say, well, you can't do that. That's not possible. I gave you that time frame to let you know, not only is it possible now, but it was possible back then. And it's something that, you know, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. Okay. Okay, we've done it, and we have the proof is in the people that you see here and some of the things that they've done.
Yes, sir. I'm grateful to be around people that have already gone through the steps that I'm wanting to be going through. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Now I have to give a little bit of a caveat to what I just said, and that is, this is not easy. It's not something where you get rich quick, okay? You really do have to work and work pretty hard at doing it. And it's not something that you grasp immediately, for sure. It took me a while to grasp hard money lending and how it actually worked and how simple it could be. And the level of simplicity is going to vary from one place to the next, particularly as I indicated earlier. If you go from a non-judicial state to a judicial state, well, another way of saying it is where you have courts that are involved in the process and attorneys that are involved in the process versus a situation where you don't have all the time frame with the foreclosures are longer and all that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that definitely takes execution and hard work.
Not to interrupt, but it is 9. People are starting to drop off. We've lost a little over a dozen people. Before we keep going with Q&A, there's 2 things. One is Joe LaBarbera and Scott Spear run the Alternative Real Estate Investing Strategies meeting. It is coming up next week at this time. Starts at 7 p.m. Networking starts at 6:45. That is where everything is discussed and deals are done except landlording, no tenants or toilets. And I don't know if Joe has anything planned for next Thursday, but the meetings are one of the highest ranked and reviewed among the membership. So if you want to keep networking with this group and keep discussing doing deals and wholesaling, that is the meeting to attend. And then a couple of notes on there. There's a link, please do the survey. And I am going to the next page so I can get on with this. Keep asking the Q&A. I'm going to go over and start the Kumo space if anybody wants to go there. There are links here for both Under One Roof, directly to their website, and to National REIA, directly to their website. If you join Freedom First, you are automatically a National REIA member. And you may now continue. Sorry to interrupt.
I see you talking, Leon, but you're muted.
I had a question real quick. I don't know if Steve's still on or if this would be for Joe McGuire, but you said one of the benefits is like the speed of the deal. So is the normal procedures as far as title search and due diligence, is that still involved, or is that a risk that's taken on by doing like the speed of that deal?
No, that's still involved.
Okay.
Because as a practical matter, the hard money lender's attorney is going to want to see title insurance and all of those things as well. So that doesn't change at all. It just makes the waiting periods a lot shorter.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
So I was muted there, and what I was saying, Andy, sorry, was that I was asking about Under One Roof and if we'd gotten a link from Jamie to where the people could do the survey. Just want to make sure I mention it because Jamie has been asked to survey individuals and then get that survey back to folks in New York State in Albany so that that information can go and help them make decisions around, let's put it this way, the amount of hurt that we're feeling as investors. So given COVID and what's happened from the standpoint of foreclosures and also more as just as importantly, the lack of rent payment for over a year. So that's a survey. We'll send out more information on it, and just wanted to point it out and ask people to please take the time to fill it out. Back to you, Mr. McKay.
Well, thank you, sir. I don't know who's going to go over to Kumo Space. I'm in there currently in the FREIA meeting room. It's just kind of a space where you can walk around the room, and the closer you are to people, the more you can converse. To answer Leon's question about under one roof, we, as of this morning at the landlord support meeting, we had not gotten an updated link from Jamie. I did not see anything come across from Kelsey Kelly or anybody in the Rochester under one roof startup. So as of right now, it's a big question mark. When we get it, if you go to our website at freia.com, ffreia.com, and register, it will add you to our mailing list, even if you choose not to join today. I think you're insane if you don't join, but it will add you to the mailing list, and you will get that link when we do get it in our hands.
So Susan just said that she received it and sent it to you.
Oh, perfect. I don't have my email up, so that's probably why I didn't see it. But it's in the chat box right now. If you click on that, it looks like it's a Google Docs. Just fill it out to the best of your ability if you have units, and every answer helps Under One Roof do their job.
Okay. Is that a wrap? Pretty close to it, yeah.
I think it is.
Any other questions from anyone? Well, just want to say thank you for